Okay, ladies, welcome to today's masterclass, which is how to vet a man. And so we covered this a little bit in our last masterclass, but I felt like we need to have a bigger conversation about it and get some feedback and shares from some of the ladies that are attending the call. So please feel free to raise your hand, and my assistant can unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself. And hi, Mary. And then we can dialogue back and forth if you're here, and you can participate in the conversation. Stories that you can share around vetting and situations that would shed some insights or just inspire the ladies or even warn the women. That would be great. Nothing's off limits here. Hi. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm just reading the chat. I love reading the chat, so make sure you post. So vetting men. So what is vetting? It's to figure out if he has the qualities that you want and any deal breakers. So vetting helps you to bring forward any deal breakers that would really prevent you from having a relationship. But it also helps you to start to get really clear about the qualities that you want. So the first thing to vetting, and I've talked about this before, is you really need to make sure that you know what your goals and vision is for the future, because that's what the process is all about. It's making sure that you're compatible and that you have the same idea about what your vision for the future. And that's why it's really important. When I look at my vetting process with Michael, he is 10 years older than me. And so it would be important to me in that vetting process, since one of my goals and vision for my lifestyle, because it's a lot about lifestyle, whether you just want to take walks and stay home and read and work on puzzles or whatever, that's what my mom does. It doesn't matter. You just need to be clear about it. If you're dating a guy that does a lot of hiking and you've got 2 hip replacements and you're not doing those things, it might be a problem for you. And so one of the things with Michael is that I wanted to make sure that we were going to continue to be physically active, because I like to not do extreme sports, but you know me, I like to work out at the gym 5 days or 6 days a week. I like to ski and be active that way. So we're still doing those things. That was important to me to find out that we had the same type of aspirations for future lifestyle. And in fact, we're going skiing later this week again. So I'm really glad that I did that. So, looking at your goals, your vision for the future, and that is really one of the most important things in terms of vetting. And it's also going to help you so that you don't get into relationships that aren't fulfilling. But more importantly, I think it's going to help you to not get strung along and have you get enmeshed or over connected with the man that isn't going to have the same lifestyle, the same goals, same visions, and perhaps you even end up getting played. For example, you date a guy. I had one client who was dating a man who was still married but separated for years because of estate issues, and it was like 8 years separated, and he had reluctantly put off getting divorced because he didn't want to have to divide the marital assets, and they were just friends and everything was fine. But the woman that he was dating and that came to me and was in my programs, I was coaching her, she really wanted him to be divorced, even though he was presenting everything about himself, was presenting to be single, but he was legally separated. The thing about her lifestyle that didn't work is that she wanted to be able to get married, and he couldn't remarry because he was still legally married. So she didn't really have a problem so much that he was legally separated and had been for 8 years, and his ex-wife was not in the picture. It was about her wanting to be married, to tell people that she was married and so forth. So that was one of her values and goals, and so she stuck to it, and eventually he did. And I can't say this is going to be the outcome for everyone in this situation, but he eventually did get his divorce, and they got married years later, and I saw the post that she got married on Facebook, and then I reached out and asked her about it. And so I'm glad that she stayed the course, but that was a really big commitment on her part because there's really no guarantee that he was ever going to get divorced. And so she guess she took a big chance, and that worked for her. And so make sure you're posting down here in the chat if you have any questions. I'm just going to make sure I can see that. There we go. See the chat because I don't see anything. So there's just all kinds of different scenarios, and I'm going to hopefully assume that all of you that are here have really worked through the realistic side of what it is that your values are, your goals, and what lifestyle that you want out of this next part of your life. And I think that it's so important to be really honest with yourself about what those goals are. I mean, I used to be more active than I am now by far. So if I was saying I was doing extreme things like surfing, that's not the case anymore. Every year I start to modify my workouts and modify the things I do so that I can continue to be active but not risk getting injured, which would be a huge problem and setback for me. And so you want to also, this will help with the amount of men that you next. The more courage that you have up front with your vetting, and it really comes down to the questions and little minor safety things we're going to talk about, and then background checks. But it really comes down to vetting process. It really comes down to knowing what you want and being really clear on that and making sure it's somewhat realistic, and then it's matched to, and I want to say this in the right way, to the kind of men that are attainable for you. I only reason I preface it with that is because some women want, I talked about this last time. She wants the jet set lifestyle. Literally, she wanted a man with a jet. And I'm talking to her that, great, I think anything's possible, but you've got to be the type of woman that a man who has a jet's going to want. And, there is, I would say I can say pretty generically, a certain type of the jet set people that want to run in those crowds. It's a pretty small niche of people. And so you're going to have those XYZ traits that those type of men are looking for. So you want to, when I say realistic, I kind of mean that, are you okay with first class? That's what I asked her. Are you okay with first class? Because maybe he doesn't have a private jet. Or what about just coach, but he loves to travel? I mean, you've got to preface everything with that. So it's really in your best interest to vet men, because not only does it help you with the amount of men that you end up nexting, it helps you save time because it's an aligned and intentional approach around dating, because you want to do everything in alignment and intentional so that you don't waste your precious time. That's really what it comes down to. So if you see a guy that's got a lot of potential, I've done a video on falling for potential, but he has children that are younger than meet your criteria, I don't care how great he is, it's going to drive you crazy to have a 4 or 5 or 6-year-old child from a marriage that maybe only lasted a couple years. It's going to interrupt your plans to travel, for your retirement, for all of that, or just to be able to enjoy your life. It's going to be a game changer. Not only that, with women that have children that are younger, with men that are maybe older, the man ends up being more involved with the ex-wife. And so that's another factor to consider when it comes to smaller children. And I don't want you to think you're being shallow or entitled if you're wanting to vet a man before you commit to him, because you have to have standards and adhere to them. That helps you take away any confusion when you're online. You have to have those standards, and it takes your personal process into account too. It's not just a handful of traits. It's like all of the things that make your desires and dreams personal to you. And it also helps you with compatibility with your life goals and future happiness. So it's really important to take the time to ask the right questions. And I think that one of the things that we want to talk about is what keeps us from asking the right questions. And so I'm going to go through that list of questions, and I would love to have you put in the chat which questions are hardest, or if you already know, what are the hardest questions that you find that resist asking when it comes to vetting men. And one of the things, should vetting be done in small increments? I love it. So any questions you have right now is you're more than welcome to ask them, because I found that the Q and A's, the questions that you're asking are super relevant because you guys are in it, right? And I can coach you on those questions. Yes, go ahead, Donna Marie. Um, Let me first answer the question, Barbara. Should vetting be done in small increments? Well, a bulk of it can be done, yes. That's absolutely a great way to look at it. Vetting is done incrementally, but there's right up front, you want to make sure that you are on the same page in terms of what you want out of an end result in a relationship. For example, if you want a long term committed relationship. So, a lot of women that I've talked to say they don't need to get married, like marriage isn't a requirement. That's mostly from women that are, I would say, over 60, but I hear from women that are under 60 to maybe 50 to 60, they want to be married. I wanted to be married. I wanted to something more final, like more, more of a commitment. And I do believe that marriage is more of a commitment. It takes more to disrupt the marital vows. So you want to do it in small increments. You want to find out and make sure, the biggest thing is if you both interested in looking for something long term, because sometimes men are out there dating and they're wonderful and there's nothing wrong with dating for fun, but they don't want it to go anywhere. They're just enjoying, and they love to treat women well, and they're gentlemen and they're doing everything right, but they're not going to be pinned down. So you might see this with some men that have never been married. That's not necessarily a red flag, in my opinion. It's just a flag. It's like, wonder why. Maybe they just enjoy the not having that bigger commitment. And so make sure you're on the same page. Some of the things that I think are really important, and you can post this in the chat, is what kind of commitment they want, what age children that they have, because that would interfere with your goals and your vision for your lifestyle, like I said earlier. And then another thing would be separated. How long separated? Is that a deal breaker for you? I recommend it is. However, everything has the gray areas. Like the client that I was talking about, that he was separated for 8 years and they had a legal separation. They were not legally married, but they hadn't split their assets up. And so, what are some of the other big deal breakers? Deal breakers, health issues. That could be a big thing if they're not as active as you are. So that would be some of these. So basically, all these things can help you create the questions that you need to be asking. So what other deal breakers are you considering? I mean, besides the obvious, I know that cigarette smoking, drinking, excessive, men that haven't managed their finances, a lot of marriages, holding down a job, men that are rude to the waiters, that have a little bit of a temper. You can tell they're short, or serious, health issues. All of these are, could be deal breakers, but you have to ask questions about those things. So I don't think that we need to go into the deal breakers. I think they're fairly obvious. And for time's sake, I wanted this call to be really succinct. And then, let's see. So let's go through some of the questions. And if you have background noise, if you can go ahead and mute yourself, that'd be great. I'm just reading through the chat to see some of the questions. Most men that you're going to vet them, so they try to avoid a phone call. I love it. Okay, thank you, Missy. That is really great perspective, and there's some background noise, so make sure you've got yourself on mute. Um, if you can, Billy, if you can mute yours, that's coming through from you. Okay, so I like this. If you're going to vet them, they try to avoid a phone call. So I think that is a great thing to look at. If a man avoids a phone call, That's a red flag because that's a perfect opportunity to vet a man. So what I recommend is send out your generators on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday nights. Those are busier nights because people reserve the other weeknights for dating nights, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday are good dating nights. So you want to get men in your funnel and start talking to men. And getting to a phone call is the second step. It's an important step because you want to be able to ask some questions that are easier to ask on the phone, saves both of you time. That's why it's so important to go ahead and have the courage to ask questions on the phone. And you can make it very conversational. Now, I have a list. I'm so glad that you posted that. If a man doesn't want to have a phone call and he wants to go straight to a date, and you have a history of not really being clear on vetting men, I recommend that you don't bypass the phone call. In fact, some women do bypass the phone call, and that's fine, but I don't recommend it. And I wouldn't bypass a phone call. I want to hear their voice. I want to get the vibe. So when I actually see them for the meeting, it's not even necessarily a date, but people call it a date. But that first meeting, you kind of feel like you know them a little. You're like, "Hi, nice to meet you." You'll still be nervous, but the ice is broken down a little bit more, and it's easier to walk into a restaurant kind of instead of cold turkey. So definitely try to get them on the phone. So let's go through some of the questions that you can ask on the phone. I'm going to actually give you, those of you who were on my last call, I gave you the scripted questions and answers. I'm actually going to give that to you again. Those of you who got it, great. If you didn't, you can grab the download because it really is it's almost like a script for you to follow to vet men. That's why I put it together for you. So one of the things, the first question is, why are you single? So now that is something that you have to ask. If how's it going for you? What's happening in your dating life? You can say it simply like that. So you're really not wanting to say, why are you still single? But how you can say it's something like, how's dating been going for you? And how do you find online dating? So that's a great icebreaker question. You're really asking them, about being single, but you're not being so direct to turn them off. And you make it conversational. So like, how's it going for you? How long you've been online? What do you think about online dating? And it kind of opens up a dialogue, and it also helps you break the ice and get the conversation going. And also to tell you a little bit about his emotional intelligence. You want to hear how he knows that this is a kind of an interview. Men know that they're getting vetted, of course, and they're going to be responsive to the degree that they're emotionally intelligent. I mean, if they want to find somebody and they're interested in you enough to get on the phone, then they recognize that this is a kind of an icebreaker pre-qualification phone call to see if you are both a fit to actually go and date in real life. So that's why men know it, and I'm glad you posted that. And so you might as well get into it. Make the most of the phone call. And then in terms of the second question is, how long have you been divorced? And so this is a great question, and how you can ask this really lets you figure out if they're still legally married. And I like to say, so when was your divorce final? So if you have been divorced, you can add, mine was finalized in, fill in the year. So I would say, I got divorced in 2007. When was your divorce finalized? So I'm offering up something vulnerable already, and then I'm asking him a vulnerable question. So that will help him to not feel defensive, like I'm asking him all these personal questions. So you can preface some of these with giving the information right up front. And then when he tells you how long, say, are you and your ex friends? How's that going? And then just see what he says about sharing a little bit about his relationship with his ex and how it's going. So this is a perfect opportunity for you to not overshare. That will definitely sabotage your chances of getting on a date. Oversharing is a classic thing that women do. We kind of forget that we're talking to a man, not a woman. So just keep it simple. I was divorced in 2007. We're amicable. Occasionally I see him here in the town I live in, but we're on good terms. He's moved on. He's been in a relationship for 10 years. You can give him a little bit of that. He's really looking to see how connected you are to your ex, if you're in touch with him, if you're still in love with him, that kind of thing. And You can wait to ask the more difficult questions when you're in person, as long as you get enough of the scripted questions and answers on the phone call, enough where you feel like you've got enough information that warrants putting hair and makeup on and going and getting in front of him. The children question, so you probably saw that on his profile, and if you forgot, remember you can say things like, remind me. I don't recall seeing if you have any children or not. So remind me. Write that down. Remind me. So if you forget anything or everything on his profile, it's okay. You can just say, "I'm sorry, I had a busy day. Remind me. Do you have any children?" Or that kind of thing. Remind me. Is a good term to lead into having him fill in the blanks for you. So, what do you do for work? I definitely recommend that you ask this question. It's so important because you want to find out what his financial status is. You want to find out if how long he's been at the job, and this kind of thing will kind of tell you what his status is in terms of that position. Now, somebody put in a great. You guys are really blowing up the chat. I love it. How to ask a man what he does as a job. I think that you can be really direct when it comes to asking men questions. I don't think you need to tap dance around it or make it flowery. Just say, so what do you do for work? What's your passion? Is your work your passion? What do you do what's your career? Just ask him, be direct. And then you can ask him a whole bunch of other questions about it to get more information. Make it conversational. Remember, it's the tree. If he tells you he's a developer, really developer, if he says he's a land developer, you can ask him all kinds of questions about that. Wow, that's pretty exciting. How long have you been doing that? 30 years. So he's very established in the business, right? So tell me a little about land developing. I don't really know much about it. What does that entail? He's going to tell you more. Oh, we develop hundreds of homes and sell them over a period of time. So, you can do the math on that. He's probably fairly successful and does really well. I like that Mary's adding financial questions need to be timed well and asked diplomatically. So true, because men obviously will be on the lookout for what they call gold diggers, and that's how they vet women, and they should be. They're looking for women that are genuine and genuinely interested in them, not their wallet. But of course, for women, we are interested in their financial position to make sure they're secure, because security makes us feel safe. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for safety with men. And that's why that's important to us. So don't dim that down. It's normal that we want to feel safe. That is why we open up to men. In order to feel safe, to even go further, we need to make sure that it's in alignment with what we want out of life. Emotional maturity is, I was going to say, as important as our finances. It's as important, ladies. Emotional intelligence and finances are, to me, have to be just equally vetted, because you can be with a man that has money, but he doesn't have the emotional maturity, intelligence, and you could be just stepping on landmines every time you say anything. You have to watch everything you say, walking on eggshells. So you're looking for his emotional maturity. Yeah. Learn questions to ask early on to know sooner. Yeah, I think that's a good feedback. Thank you, Mary. Questions to ask to know a man's emotional maturity early on. One of the things that I know will tell you his emotional maturity, and it's not necessarily, first of all, you want to know what his relationship is with his ex and with his children. It's not, I feel, so important to know what a man's relationship is with his parents. And here's why. This is my opinion, because we change. I've changed. I've grown. I've matured. It's not important that I know what Michael's relationship with his parents. His parents are both passed away at this time. So that's not relevant. And he could have changed. I mean, his relationship with his parents was not a great one. But that didn't deter me, because I know that he's his own person. It doesn't mean that his relationship with his children is going to be bad. So I really wanted to know about his relationship with his ex-wife, which was not good. And when he talked about it, he got angry. So I noted that his emotional healing or intelligence in that area is not good, and that could actually affect me. So that's something that I really paid attention to. Now, his emotional maturity and intelligence in other areas was really good. Great with his children, great with his business partners, great with his family, his siblings, that is, and people that he talks to, super friendly. But the one relationship that I felt was maybe the most revealing about how he would treat me was the relationship he had with the ex. And that's something that I talked to him right away up front, and he was willing to work on it. And that's why we progressed forward. So I wouldn't be put off by that, but I would definitely dig into it a little deeper because, excuse me, let me take a sip. If you have a man who has a negative relationship with his ex, he may be contributing to it because he's still bitter about the breakup. A lot of times men can be really bitter about the breakup, especially when it comes to the loss of assets and resources. And I'm not going to judge that one way or another. I can just see that for men, it's painful when they lose money and they get angry about it. And you don't want that anger to filter over to you. So how do we ask questions early on about a man's emotional maturity? So what I would recommend is when a man expresses distress around a previous relationship, around the fallout in a partnership, those are the questions that you want to bring forward more of. I'm sorry that happened to you. So empathy first, and then digging into that more. Like, finding out, say example, so again, every conversation's more personal and it has a lot of nuances. But if you think about it, he's talking to you about his business and say he had a business partner and now he went and he sold his half of the business off. So, you can ask him about his partner and if he's still in contact, if he sees him. It seems like if he was in business for 20 years with a partner and he doesn't talk to him anymore, there's a flag for you to ask him about. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Sounds like 20 years is a long time to not have that relationship. What happened? You just ask him what happened. Remember, you're coming from curiosity, genuine curiosity, wanting to get to know him and why he's not in a relationship with his previous partner of 20 years. So those are kind of things you ask about. What happened in your relationships with the people that he's not in contact with anymore? But I love that Mary recommended timing the financial questions. That is very important because you don't want to scare them off before you've made it. An emotional connection. Making the emotional connection is what's going to create the man to pursue you. It's going to keep asking you out. That's pursuing you, by the way. If he's asking you out, he's pursuing you. If you're looking for more of a pursuit, then you'll have to communicate to him. Like if you want him to text you more or call you more, you can communicate that. But if he's asking you out and you're regularly dating, he's still pursuing you. And so going back to the question list, now I'm going to give this to you. In fact, since we've given it to you before, go ahead and post this in the chat, Addie, if you would, so that the ladies can see where I'm reading from, and then you guys can download it later. Don't get distracted though, but another question is going back to what kind of work do you do? So you want to remember this is a tree. Think of vetting questions as a tree. Okay, the tree has a lot of branches. Your job is to build those branches out and then grow leaves onto them. So if you're asking him about work, then ask him all about his work, but make sure that you're keeping in mind men do love to talk about their work. So ask intentional questions. Ask him about his partners or about how long he's been doing it and in previous businesses. What you're looking for is relationships. You're going to find out about his emotional maturity when you find out the kind of relationships he's had or still has. If you're hearing that he doesn't talk to his son and his business partner and him had a falling out, there could be some issues with his emotional IQ and some parallels there. And so you're wanting to make note of those so you can ask him more in-depth questions And maybe you won't be able to ask them all in one sitting, but you'll notice that there's something going on. Like when Michael was distraught about his ex-wife, I I knew that there was probably something more to it, and he did share with me, what had happened, but that's his side of the story. And then when I got to know him a little bit more, I could see where, not defending her, but I could see where what she had to deal with, in other words, what she was up against, and how rigid Michael could be when I met him, and how much I wanted to help him open up and consider other things. So that probably set her off a little bit, but I was able to navigate that a little more easily than maybe she did. She didn't have the tools that I had, so maybe they could have made more headway if she had a better way to deal with Michael and the way he was showing up in the world, right? Shoulda, coulda, woulda's, right? But so let's move on. Are you dating a lot? Men ask this question, and this could be a good vetting opportunity. This is how you find out about ex-girlfriends or other women that they're seeing, or if they're dating for fun. So this question on this common dating questions PDF that I'm giving you is, so define a lot. If he asks you, are you dating a lot? Are you dating other men? And you can answer that, and then you can say, I'm dating. And you always just answer, I'm dating. You have to give specifics. And, I've been dating for a couple of years, looking for something more serious. I've met some wonderful men. Nobody special right now that I'm dating exclusively. So you want to let them know you're not dating exclusively anybody, but let them know that you're dating. And then you can ask them the same question, how digging into how online dating's going. And you can even ask them, if you had any bad experiences online. They might, any stories they can share with you, and I know this is kind of a negative, but any stories that they can share with you about a negative experience will kind of show you their level of emotional intelligence. If they're taking personal responsibility, if you notice that they've contributed to it. So for me, I could share something that happened that was negative, but I can take responsibility for, my role in it, or that I've learned to overcome that, or I now approach things differently, that kind of thing. You can see if they have that growth mindset. Now, I threw this question in this worksheet, when was the last time you had sex? Just to kind of throw a wrench in everything, because sometimes men will ask that. And first of all, it's it's highly inappropriate to be asked that question, for anybody to ask you. But what you can do if somebody does ask you that is, why do you want to know? That doesn't seem appropriate, but I'm just curious. So you can take these questions and throw it into an opportunity to see what his level of emotional intelligence is. I don't think that's appropriate, but I'm curious as why you want to know that. And so you can kind of put him on the spot, calling him on it, but coming from, a sense of, I'll go along, but I have a boundary around that question. Or you can just say, it's far too early to discuss a topic like that, for crying out loud. I could ask you the same, but I'll refrain. So you can always put a spin on things and see how he handles your boundary when you do that. I think that's really important, to see how men accept you're asking them to respect your privacy. And, because dating's all about respect and chemistry. Respect creates chemistry. When you ask a man to respect your wishes, it creates chemistry, because men they want to be with a woman who respects herself. So when you put out a boundary, and if you do it in the right way with your feather, don't think you're going to push him away. In fact, he's going to think that you are a quality woman. So again, another question is, are you dating anyone special? So I would offer that up right away when they ask, if you're dating other men. Say, I am, but no one exclusively. So instead of saying special, I would say exclusively, because exclusive is a definition that defines you're not seeing other people. And special is a little too nebulous. And then what are you looking for in a relationship? I think that the answer that I gave you on that worksheet is really good, and you could try to memorize it, because it's, I'll repeat it for you. Eventually, I'm looking for an exclusive relationship where I feel really loved and respects me, has a sense of humor, witty, a good listener, good communicator, financially sound, is honest. Anyway, so it's like I know that sounds like a list, but I want it all. So if you could just memorize some of these answers, you can embellish and add in and make them more conversational. But you need to have the answers, the questions down, the questions and the answers down so that they come off sounding authentic and genuine. And then it becomes more fun and it actually gets more interesting. Um, So let me go on to some of the questions that are in the chat. Health status is the most difficult question to ask, and you don't know what stage this should be asked at. So it seems like that's really important. So for me, I can get an assessment from their health based on looking at their picture, a general vibe, and then when I see them in person, you can get another level of their health assessment. If they're radically overweight, you can make some assumptions about their health, right? But I think that in person, that would be a good question to ask if there's no red flags in their pictures, especially if you like them. So I know that sounds counterproductive, like ask a health question if I like them, I don't want to scare them away. But I think it's really important. So, where are you coming from? I think is a good starting point. Are you asking from a health perspective because you've had, and I'm not picking anyone out particularly, if you've experienced health issues and you have experience, are you coming from a place of, I've been there and I don't want to go through that again? Or maybe you lost your spouse who had some health issues and you don't want to be the nurse again. So, where are you coming from? So I think that if you preface these questions, for example, I will give you some role playing here. Just scripts here. So like a love script. So basically, it's like if I had an ex-husband that I had to take care of that was really sick, I might. I would definitely go and ask questions about that. I know this might seem like a really strange question, but I'm just wondering what your health's like. I had a really challenging last couple of years with my ex-husband because he went through 3 or 4 rounds of cancer. And unfortunately, he's still dealing with that, and it really impacted our relationship and how he handled the stress. So it's a delicate question, but if this is a concern for you, you're going to see how much emotional intelligence they have, right? Now, let's turn that around. If a man asked me that, so he says to me, "What's your health? Jackie, you look like you're in great shape, but I had a really stressful situation with my ex-wife who didn't handle her cancer well, and it ended up causing a big division in our relationship, resulted in divorce or whatever." And I'm using cancer because I think it's something that I think people want to know about. You should be prepared to offer up something if somebody's being that direct and asking you. It just depends. If you have had cancer and you're in remission, that's up to you to decide if you want to share that. If they've had it and you've had it, I think sharing is really great. If I've been dealing with an illness and you're asking about it, it makes sense to share that, but make sure you're only sharing if you feel comfortable and safe and you feel good about that. Because again, it makes you feel very vulnerable. So yeah, health status, it's one of those more of a slippery slope. And so I would ask them in person at a date, and I think that you can ask it sooner than later because you're going to get a level of emotional intelligence. They might become defensive. You kind of need to see that. And if you see that they're becoming defensive, you can say, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to pry into your personal history. That's not my intention at all. But since we're here and we're dating, and I've had some negative experiences in the past, I thought I would kind of throw that out there." Whenever you're ready to share, I'd love to hear it. So you can back up a bit, but you're also looking to gauge what their level of emotional intelligence is, and I think it's going to tell you a lot. So, Anna Marie, men who are not emotionally intelligent or unwilling to communicate. Yes, I think that We'll see. Unwilling to communicate's a good one. Emotionally intelligence can be worked on. If a man doesn't show signs of that, you can ask him to communicate. You can ask to communicate in a different way where he would become more emotionally intelligent about communication. Some men here, you just want them, they just want to fix something for you for asking them. If you're asking them to just listen, you have to preface things with, I just want you to listen right now, and I don't need any feedback. I just need someone to be a sounding board. So sometimes we mistake telling men about what we're going through, and then they start to fix and solve our problems, and then we're like, you didn't listen to me. So but I hear what you're saying about the emotional intelligence. I think that is so important as we get older. It's and I'm sure you can relate, dealing with people that have short fuses, that are quick to judge, that are narrow minded, that don't have a lot of empathy. It's really hard to be in the same room with them because that everybody has moments, right? Everywhere in life, we're going to go to Vons and there's an issue maybe, or in the parking lot. We have to be patient. We have to have empathy. We can't blow our fuse because we've had a long day and we can't find a parking spot in the Vons parking lot. You start raging on people. So finding out somebody's emotional intelligence, you will if you're asking a lot of questions. Um, so how do you ask a man if he's financially stable? So that the reason why asking that direct question doesn't work is because what is financially stable to you may not be financially stable to him, or vice versa. He may think renting a nice townhouse, having some money in savings, and a really good job is financially stable. So asking things like, you know, you have to ask different questions to find that out. For example, how to find out if a man's financially stable. You can ask questions like, um, so you live in, so I'm going to use my neighborhood. You live in the village, in La Jolla Village. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Oh, where do you live? I live over on Eads. Oh, you live on Eads. Do you have a condo on Eads? No, I own a home. Oh no, I have a condo. Oh, are you renting, or do you own? So you just ask, like, oh, I'm renting. Oh, okay, great. How long have you lived there? I just love the area. So you're finding out how long they've been renting. If they've been renting for 5 years, they might continue to rent. Um, if they own it, then now you have a homeowner, right? And so if they're a homeowner, you can ask more questions. Oh, that's awesome. Did you have a chance to refi before the interest rates went up? Do you see how you can talk about finances indirectly without asking them direct questions? If like, yeah, I actually got in on that 3% a couple years ago. Great, right? That's what we did. So that's how I know to ask that. So if they're renting, they could own a home in another state. That's what I found out from Michael when we were dating 10 years ago. He owned a home in another state, but he was renting. And then we ended up moving in together and buying in La Jolla together. So don't be put off by a man who's renting. You never know what his long-term plans are. But you can say, fabulous. Do you love the area that you're renting in? And what are your long-term plan? Are you plan on staying in the area, or you see yourself settling down there? So every answer opens up another kind of branch in the tree. But you just have to keep the conversation going, especially about finding out if a man's financially stable. You can ask them about trips they're going on. They were not going to be taking trips, playing golf. That's an expensive sport, going on trips. Men aren't going to be traveling, playing golf necessarily. Yes, some of them spend a lot of money and they're not financially stable, but that's a small bracket. I think the majority of men who are spending money and traveling have some financial stability. Yeah, I don't want you to be with men that are freeloaders either. How to approach financial questions. So financial questions are done over time. And and you can assume a hefty amount of financial questions like we just discussed. Is he a homeowner? And if not, what are his long-term goals if he's planning on being? He might say, I sold it and I'm going to buy an RV and travel the world or travel the country. You need to find out what his plans are for the future. If he has two kids in college and he's paying for that, you can factor that in, right? So you can just assume that. Wow, you can say things like, "Oh my gosh, two kids in college. That's got to be your. Are you doing the heavy lifting on that? That's got to be quite the financial commitment to support your children. Though you don't have to make it sound like a negative. But I would take time to ask those questions if there's somebody you're interested in. If they're asking you to split the check, that's going to be a sign that either they've got some wonky beliefs going or they're not financially stable or they're wanting you to be an equal breadwinner. And so those are things to look out for. I'm thinking of some other financial questions that you can ask. So, owning a home, asking them about their car. Maybe they just got a new car. Did you find that leasing or buying was a better deal? And why? So, if they just got a new car, you can ask them about leasing or buying. Actually, I think it's a great question. And it's almost like you're asking for their, not help, but, right now, we just found out if Michael buys his next vehicle, he can write 100% of it off versus leasing. So these kind of questions about assets, are important, and they are really relevant to dating. How do you proceed when asking about health and he's taking as if I care about him when I ask questions for me? How do you proceed when you're asking about health and he's taking it as you care about him when you ask questions for you? Is it a problem that he cares about you or that he thinks you care about him? You could make some jokes. So, in other words, making it more lighthearted, not joking at what he's saying. But I feel like you're saying you don't want him to think you're overly invested in him before you are, emotionally speaking, and tip your hand like you're more into him than he is into you when you're asking about his health issues. So you can show empathy. Showing empathy is different than caring about a man. See, things like, that must be really hard for you. Or how are you managing that? That must be really hard for you. Empathetic, like, wow, that must be difficult. You must be, how are you holding up under that? Or how are you managing that? That's got to be a challenge. So giving them feedback in that way and asking them more questions. So there's some other posts. I'm going to just read this to you. I won't mention names if you're sending me private messages, but it makes it more confusing to me. So a man was saying on the phone that, or on the computer, that he had got a concussion and shouldn't be on a screen. If he asked if he wanted to talk on the phone, he said doesn't give his phone number to strangers, had some difficulties, nothing personal. So that is all blatant signs of a scammer. Won't get on the phone, doesn't want to give you his phone number. He can get a Google Voice. You all know that. It doesn't want to get on the screen. Okay, well, I don't buy that either because he had a concussion, but he should be able to get on the phone. So he's avoiding any way for you to identify his identity, and that is a number one sign of a scammer. So if a man's avoiding phone calls and avoiding a video chat, just next him. I mean, you don't have time for that. Just get him on the phone. If they won't get on the phone, just say, I understand, but that's important to me. So good luck in your search. Take good care, block and delete. Right. That's right. If you increase your chances to a no-show, if you don't get them on the phone, because if they can't commit to a phone call, they might not show up for a date that you haven't pre-qualified for them for, and you'll be sitting there waiting, and then they never show up. Yeah, and I really like hearing a man's voice before I meet them because it just makes me feel a little more comfortable about who I'm meeting. And I can pick up, 70% of coaching is my voice. So you can pick up things about a person about how they're using their voice. And so make sure you're using your voice effectively when you're talking with these men. And so I just tuned into how I was using my voice, and I noticed that I went a little bit higher in my pitch just automatically. So a higher pitch is a more feminine sound. And in the morning, my voice can be a little deeper, a little more, not really raspy, but deeper. But then as the day progresses, get lighter. So just be mindful of your voice. Sometimes if they ask they want to meet for coffee, you can say, what do you think about a phone call first? Usually they say yes. Then they give me their number and tell me to call them. That's good. That's exactly what you should do. And if a man gives you his number, call him or text him and say, hey, it's Jackie from Match. Good time to take a call? So just if men give you their number, grab it and give them your number or text them your number and say, here, it's me. Call me when you have a chance. And you can redirect them to call you. But I think it's fine to call a man in this day and age. Um, Perfect. Another way of saying is give me a call and when we can check about details. If they don't call, the call doesn't go well, you don't have to go out with him. That's right. Call doesn't go well, you don't have to go out with him. And he may not ask you out if the call doesn't go well for him. That's why you want to practice having your questions ready and being conversational about the way you pepper him with questions. Um, if you're single and haven't really dated in 20 years, I think that it's okay to admit that, but they might assume that you're going to be naive to a point. But so you could say something to add to that. Say, well, I haven't really dated in quite some time, but I am ready to date again. And they might ask you why, and you can tell them why. I and what are your reasons? You were focused on your career, you were focused on your family, you lost a loved one, and you were scared of getting hurt. Being really vulnerable about why you haven't dated for 20 years is going to be important so it makes sense to the other person. And they're really just looking for something that makes sense. So if you can come up with an answer that doesn't devalue you but makes sense to another human, then they're gonna be fine with it. They're gonna still be interested in getting to know you. Where are the scripted questions? And so, Addie, can you post the link in the chat box for everybody that's on the call to get the scripted questions and answers? So if you have a very bad relationship with your ex-husband, what's a good way to answer when you're asked how my relationship with my ex-husband is? So let me just talk about that for a minute. So if you have a bad relationship with your ex-husband, I'm just wondering why you still have a relationship with your ex-husband. So you could be like, I actually don't have a relationship with my ex-husband. We didn't end on the best terms, so I thought it would be wise to actually sever the relationship. So why? I'll tell you when I get to know you more. So it's how you say things, and it's who you're being when you say them. I find is the most important. How you say it and who you're being when you say it. Did you say? I know that they can't see your face, but my answer was confident and it was clear and it wasn't with resentment. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have an amicable divorce, so we don't have a healthy relationship. So I felt it was best to sever the relationship, and I've totally moved on. So what about you? So and you might say, well, why did you do that? Say, well, I would be happy to share that a little bit more when I get to know you a little bit more. Are you comfortable with that? Though, you could just say he had some anger issues. You can just say one little thing. You just don't want to throw him under the bus, even if he did have anger issues. He wasn't a kind person, and that wore me down over time. You can soften it because I don't want you to come off sounding bitter and resentful or unforgiving, because that's just really not attractive, right? So I was just unmatched Um, After a call on Bumble, he asked when I was divorced and if I had any serious relationships since then. I said 10 years and did not date for the first year and didn't date during the 2 years of COVID, but I haven't had any serious relationships in 7 years. He's had several. I feel this was a deal breaker for him. How do I answer this? I was truthful. Okay, that's great. Thank you for posting that in the chat. So basically, it was a deal breaker for him to not have had a serious relationship. And at least that's what she picked up. So several serious relationships in 7 years. That kind of is a bit of a red flag for me. Um, but I don't know if if you need to change that. I think that how you answered it was really good, and if he men have their deal breakers as well, we have to accept that. So maybe for him, he's looking for somebody that's had more serious relationships, and so that would be a problem for him. I like how you answered it. You were truthful. And but you can kind of clean it up a bit. I didn't date for this first couple of years, and I chose not to date during COVID. So I guess you could say I really was single for 5 years out of 10 that I've been divorced. What about you? So you can be a little more, put it more in perspective. But I feel I'm really ready now. I would add that at the end. I'm really ready now, because I think that might be what somebody who's looking for a committed relationship wants to hear. I like this. Thank you, Maureen. Great question. What do your kids think of you being online? I think that's a great question. So, what Michael said was that his kids made him go online and they wanted to see him settle down because his ex-wife had already been remarried. So, what that told me, and what that question is so great, Maureen, thank you, is um, that he has his children's um, approval for him to be online. So if you're talking to a dad and his kids are wanting him to be online, then they've given him approval and you're not going to have any resistance meeting them. So that's actually a good thing. Thank you. Great question. They don't always answer that. One man asked me a great question that I adopted and complimented him on. He asked me, what is something that I would not compromise with? I would not compromise with. Many of us can get stuck in a behavior, so I loved answering it and asked it back to him. It spurred some great conversation. I really like that. I'm going to make a little note of that. Thank you. So, um, what is something that I would not compromise with? So, one thing that I can say that I wouldn't compromise with is if Michael didn't treat my children well, or if Michael didn't like my children, or if my children and Michael hit heads. I would really want to know why. Knowing my children, I don't think that would be possible, but it could be, and that could be a real problem for me. And I wouldn't put a new man that I was dating ahead of my kids, even though they're adults. Um, Now that my children are much older, they're not really around much, so I might actually change that. I was answering that from a perspective of 10 years ago, but now 10 years later, I don't know if it'd be that big of an issue because we've all grown and evolved. But I think that's a great question. Think on what you would not compromise on. Could be you wouldn't move out of your town if you lived in San Diego. I'm not going to leave San Diego. I'm not going to used to do action sports, now you don't. So think about what it is for you. Would you ever consider going back to, doing triathlons or whatever? Just say no, absolutely, that I feel complete in that area. Why do you ask? So I think that's a great question. Thank you for posting that. Spiritual intelligence and maturity is important. That brings to mind religion and politics. I recommend that you're pretty aligned in those areas because they can be really polarizing, right? As we've found out in the last several years. So make sure you're in the same general consensus of your belief system, especially if you're practicing a certain religion and you want that kind of support and feedback. Make sure you choose somebody that has similar beliefs. Otherwise, there'll be strife and you don't want to set yourself up for that. How do you balance so they can keep their masculine? You're not becoming the alpha interrogator. I always balance all of that with the smile and humor. Humor. So you have to be humorous. And another thing is that I feel that women, when they get into the super alpha interrogator, is that you start competing. When a man starts telling you about his career and you start feeling that you're interrogating, you might have gone into kind of relating to him from a maybe you've had a big career. So you want to make sure you allow him to share whatever he's going to share. And if you notice you're getting any triggers, I think that's when you start getting the interrogation. Staying grounded and not allowing your mind go into any of the triggers that could be going, the landmines are going off in your own mind. I think that's one of the big problems. Why we turn into the alpha interrogator, that's really cute. It's because we get triggered and we start asking questions from that trigger. So you have to be managing your own emotional intelligence when you're doing this interrogation. And it is a bit of an interview. It really is. They know that. That's why I'm really wanting to educate you on ways to make it conversational. Your tone of voice, sense of humor, not taking things personal, not. Of course, you're going to get triggered, but not going into your trigger. Setting your trigger aside, so when you notice it, you're like, I'll have to look at why that's triggering me so much. Okay. What are your thoughts on when asked to meet for coffee to see if there's chemistry? I'm fine with meeting for coffee, prefer lunch or dinner, but when they mention to see if there's chemistry, it feels like they are teenagers. Well, so that's that. So I would just say that it's not necessarily a teenager request. So there's something going on inside you that's created a judgment around that. And maybe it's that you just haven't given yourself permission to not go meet for coffee ever again because you don't want to. You don't want to meet for coffee. You want to meet for dinner or lunch. But I think what you could do, could you switch to meeting for a drink? So it doesn't have to be alcoholic. Could be you could order a Coca-Cola, you can order a hot tea. But I think that some men do want to just meet for a drink for the time commitment and also financial commitment to see if there is a match before they invest more time and money. So I actually recommend just going for a drink. And if you don't want to go in the morning, go at night because then you don't have to invest any more of your time. Like go for, a glass of wine or, like I said, a soda, a sparkling water, Pellegrino with a lime. Looks just like an alcoholic beverage and you'll be drinking it. And so see if you can switch to that. I feel that it's okay to have, just a drink to pre-qualify somebody. What about, let's see where this goes. What's a good way to direct it to find out what they want? It sounds like they don't know. I would say that a lot of men don't know. Like we go in having this list, but I think men they know what they want, but then they don't. Each woman's so different. They're looking for a woman who makes them feel differently. So I think men, if men could say, I'm looking for a woman who makes me feel different about a different perspective or different about life or more excited about life, then that would kind of be the same as not knowing what they want. Men want to feel alive with a woman. They want to feel that you get them. You're not going to judge them. So it's a feeling they're looking for. When men say there's just something about her, there's just something about her. That's what they're looking for. That's something. So it's hard for them to put that into words. What's a good way to direct to find out what they want? It sounds like they don't know. So if they're saying, let's see where it goes, you didn't ask them the question in the very beginning, which is, so, you've been online. So what is it you're looking for? Something long-term, more serious? Or are you just dating to have fun right now? That's like one of the first questions you want to say right up front. Even if they put it on their profile, go ahead and ask them again, because then they can tell you in their own words with their own tone of voice and their energy. What about a 60-year-old man, never married, says he hasn't married because he doesn't want to lose half of his stuff? Well, you can say, well, I'll give you kudos for being honest. I would say just it's going into it with too much negativity. He's saying that I wouldn't even want to talk to a guy that says doesn't want to lose half of his stuff. You can say, thanks for your honesty. That's the funniest thing I've ever heard. I haven't heard anybody say that. And fair enough. If that's, it's not much to say. He's already made up his mind. He's not going to get married. If you want to get married, I wouldn't be going out with him again. So he's not interested in taking any more risks. He's living in too much fear. That kind of sets the tone for your relationship. And he's always going to be suspicious of you. So I would like vote with your feet, end the date, and go ahead and leave because he's not in a good place where you want to go with him. I'm just looking for more questions. My recent experience was with a man who didn't really know how to express himself. If something was bothering him, he let it build up, then became a much bigger problem. Great feedback. So you're looking for a man who's, this conversation on the phone and the first date or two, the conversation is going to reveal about a lot about his emotional intelligence. So the more questions you can ask and how he responds is going to tell you. And I'm glad that experience hopefully surfaced relatively soon for you, Mary. Yeah, if you want marriage next, yeah, I agree. Because, yep, let's see. What if they are retired? Great question. We're going to be wrapping it up here, ladies, so just hang on a little bit longer. I'm going to go through all the questions really quickly. What if they are retired? Um, Great. So, what do you do with your time? Great, you're retired. Congratulations. How wonderful. So, what are your plans now that you're retired? Do you have any trips planned? I'd love to hear about it. So you're looking for lifestyle questions. What are they're not going to be traveling all over the world or traveling all over the country if they have challenges around their finances. Ask them what they're going to be doing. Men are retired and they have some resources. They're going to actually want you to have more time to spend with them. So that's actually a great question, not only about their resources, but about how much time they have on their hands. If you're still working full time and they're retired, that won't be a fit for you because I don't think it would, because then they're just going to be waiting for you to get off work unless they want to retire you. So um, let's see, what other questions? I hope that helps in terms of retired. If I asked Michael, um, you could ask a man, do you ever plan on retiring? The man that works full time. Here's another way to find out about finances. You could ask him, do you ever plan on retiring? He might say, not for a long time, I need to work. Or he might say, no, because I love to work. So Michael would say, no, I never want to retire. And then you can say, really? Why is that? You'd think that you would say you want to retire. So he would say because he'd be too bored. He never sees himself not working. He'll slow down, but he's not going to retire because he wants to keep busy. So that's actually a good question. If they are not retired and they're working, you can ask them when they plan on retiring and see if you can get any more information about the resources. So what? So just looking at the calls and dates, if they're always initiating, how much should you be initiating and contributing to it? So if you don't reciprocate or have interest, I would let them pursue for the first at least two times. Okay, you get online, you get on the phone, they ask you out. That's one. You go and you go out. They ask you out again. That's two. And now for the third date, you could on the second dates do things like if it's going well and they say, let's go out this weekend, you can say, why don't you come to my neighborhood? We can go for a walk. Let's get a coffee and go walk by the ocean or whatever. So you can start to participate in terms of creating the next date and input, things like that. I saw this new golfing range just open indoors. You want to try to go to that? You can start to offer in things, but I think that you definitely want to show interest. Um, Third date or fourth date, have them over for dinner. This is if things are going well. That's what I did. I did it 3 times, dinner out. Then we did 2 dinners, one like lunch, walk around, walk about, and then I offered to have Michael come over for dinner. And he had, I felt really comfortable at that time. Thank you, Team Jackie, for posting the questions. But if you could post the link to the worksheet so the ladies can download it, that would be great. If you haven't already, I don't know if you did. I went out with someone with a great chemistry between us for 3 months before I found out that he'd had a stroke 2 years before, and as a result, he'd become impotent. Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. These things happen. This is not an exact science. Sometimes we find things out after we've already emotionally connected to them, and then it's like, ay, 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 what am I going to do? I don't want to start over. I like this man. And especially when it comes to um, erectile dysfunction. Sometimes that happens. And now, you know that there's new things out beside, if it's not a permanent situation, that they can rejuvenate their erection because they're doing it to vaginal rejuvenation now, and it works for erectile dysfunction. If it's something that can be addressed, there are ways to address it that are pain-free and not surgical. So you can always suggest those things if that's a possibility. But thank you for adding that in the chat. To leave someone when they have an issue is not a person of marital integrity. That just depends, in my opinion, on the issue. I think that this is my opinion again, but when you have a wedding contract, you agree to certain things. If any part of the contract's broken, I think that you can leave the relationship. They shut down, they don't want to grow with you anymore. That would be grounds for me to leave. They become drinking more than they used to when you got married. That would be terms to leave. If they had an affair, that would be a term to leave. If they lost their job and refused to work and they were working when you met them, that could be a reason to leave. If they make radical changes to your lifestyle, then it could be a good reason to leave. And I don't think it would be out of integrity. So this is when my little puppies get a little impatient from me being on a call. An hour and 15 minutes is about as long as they're giving me. Okay, be right with you guys. Let's go through a couple more of these questions. Now, ladies, in just a few minutes, before I end the call, I am going to give you I'm going to talk to you about joining my inner circle. For those of you who are complete after we're done with the vetting questions, you're free to hang up. Those of you who want to hear about how you can join the inner circle and the bonus course that you get for joining this month, then you can stay on. So I'll give you that defining line. You're welcome, Mary. I'm so glad that you're here. Should I contact a guy I started to date for several weekends? Then he didn't call. Not sure if he's ghosting me or just not interested. If he hasn't reached out to you, so I think when a man disappears, if a man doesn't reach out to you for 48 hours, you can go ahead and reach out to him. Even 3 days. How's it going? What's going on? Anything new? You can just check in with him if you're not exclusive. Came across this article, was thinking of you. If you saw something that made you think of him, that's why you want to make sure you're dating other men. But if a week's gone by, as long as you are okay, if they don't answer you, you can still ask them. But typically, if a man isn't texting you, or lining something up, he's not going to. But again, if you're not over attached and over enmeshed with him, then go ahead and ask him like a random question. See if you can draw him back in, because that's a sign that he's dating other women or he's not that into you. So that's why I recommend you to reach out and make sure you're not attached to an outcome so that doesn't hurt. Because it might sting a little bit. But you're like, oh, at least I know that he's not that interested and you don't have to waste any more time. So questions about health for me. I live with a disease. I know I should tell him on the second date. I don't think you should tell him on a second date. I think that get to know him. So I'm going to marry Jane for you. I recommend that you date for fun until you get good at dating. Then you can practice talking about your health history. Because if you're getting past the second date, then I want you to get the confidence of what it's like to have a date for fun experience. So don't tell him on the second date if it's going well. Keep dating him because, like I said, I want you to have a positive experience. Ladies, if you haven't dated in a while and you're out of practice and you're not good at dating, don't tell him all these big things. Just date for fun and have a good time. Build up your confidence so that when you feel more confident about dating, you're in a better position, emotionally speaking, to tell a man about a bigger health issue. And only tell a man that you're interested in, that he's showing interest in you. You don't share personal health history unless you're creating an emotional connection that could weather that kind of information. So in other words, you don't share something personal unless the connection's strong enough to be able to withstand that. Once you share something personal and the connection is there, typically they will consider that and it could still work out. You could work together. They may say, oh, it happened to my mother, or my mother had that, my friend had it. I know how to deal with that. It's not going to bother me that you have a special diet. I'm used to it, whatever. You come together, you find out you have more in common than you think. So don't throw yourself under the bus so quickly. I don't want to get married and risk losing half of my stuff either. Does this mean I shouldn't date? No, it means you should get a prenup. Get a prenup. Date. And then if you guys are becoming really serious and you talk about moving in together, getting married, say, how do you feel about a prenuptial agreement, honey? Smile. I feel great about prenuptial agreements. Makes everybody feel safe in this day and age. It's pretty common. I signed one with my first husband. Michael asked me to sign one. I said, sure, give it to me. Let me have enough time to have my attorney review it. And then he never gave it to me. So we didn't sign one. We've been together for 10 years. So I think that they're perfectly fine. And if a man balks, then he's not your guy if you feel really strongly about it. So just go into it explaining that you want to make sure he feels safe. You want to feel safe. You want to outline your assets and make sure that everything's on the table and you're completely transparent. What guy doesn't want that? I think men will be receptive to it. Should I contact a guy? Oops, I already read that. Why would a man be intimidated by a woman who has vehicle, home, and financial security? Well, he may have other reasons. It may not be he may have lack of confidence. His self-esteem may be low. It's probably nothing to do with you. A man has to have a healthy self-esteem in order to be with a woman who has more financial assets. He doesn't have to have more financial assets than her. He has to have a healthy self-esteem about it. And he also needs to not look at that as his money. And so why would he be intimidated? Because he's insecure, because he has regret about his choices in life, because he didn't make some good financial choices for himself and regrets that. So it could be a lot to do with his history and how he got to where he is in life, where he is intimidated by that. So sorry for having that experience, but those men are out there. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. And so I think that this was a great call, ladies. Thank you for being here. And I'm just sending you all so much love for being here. Hang in there. Never quit and you won't fail. Okay, lots of love. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Let me feel your love again. 'Cause I've been running round in circles screaming out your name. Take me to a different place. Just the two of us and we can stay up all night, kissing under streetlights, doing what we want.